Hi, I'm Nathan from Series Geeks, and in this video I'm going to talk about the top 5 losers in Codex Space Marines. At a later date I'm going to do a top 5 biggest winners of Codex Space Marines, so it's best to get the most negative one out of the way first. The choices I'm going to go over now are going to be in no particular order, but I will explain why I believe they've lost out in this new Codex Space Marines. So starting with the first, number 1, Space Marine Scouts. This one is fairly self-evident. They've been moved from the troops choices to the elites choice, which in itself doesn't sound like it would be terminal, but the whole reason most people took scouts were as a cheap troops choice, so they could select other things with the point value or power level available, and scouts being relatively cheap meant that you could have a rock bottom price investment to get a detachment. Now, scouts being elites choices, we're pretty much in a position where no one's going to take them. Why would someone waste an elite's choice on a unit that is basically outclassed in every category it tries to compete in by another unit somewhere in the Codex book? If it's snipers you want, there are better snipers. If it's objective holders, well, you're already paying points on troops choices, so why are you going to waste points on another objective holder when you've already got that? So yeah, it's a real disappointment to see scouts laned so low when previously they were a mainstay of many Space Marine armies. If I was to fix them, I would have kept them in the troops, but I would have said that they can only be selected for every intercessor or tactical squad that you have in the army. That would have meant when everyone has a single battalion and they have a bare minimum of 3 troops choices, they'd only have 1 scout squad, so they still have to have other squads. So it would have fixed the problem of people just taking scouts all the time and then loading up on elites choices. There's not even a stratagem that I would waste on these guys. Smoke screen, yeah, great, you can have a -1 to hit, but 1, that's not stackable with any other modifiers, and 2, you're going to spend a command point to try and protect your scouts when you bought them because they were cheap and you didn't mind if they were dying in the first place? I don't think so. Massive disappointment, and the first on my list. In a similar vein to scouts, we have another elites choice, the Riva Squad. This unit was absolute rubbish in the previous edition, and it continues to be so in this one. What makes it a big loser, though, is Aggressor squads have had an additional -1 to their combat knives. For some reason, Riva squads haven't. So comparatively speaking, Rivas have actually gotten worse in this edition. Sure, Riva's got an upgraded weapon, they got an AP -2 pistol, but at the end of the day it's just a strength 4 12-inch range pistol, so it's not even that good. Even with their band-aid special rules, they're not that good. Death from above sounds like it'd be good, but on a unit that doesn't even have minuses to the AP in close combat, why are you going to be putting them up close to people? I don't know. Why wouldn't you use an assault squad or a Vanguard veteran squad to jump in and get closer? Or if you're going to use a death from above ability, why wouldn't you use Terminators to do the same? Same goes for the grapnel launcher. It enables them to move vertically as if it's flat terrain, but what use is that? They only have a movement of 6. So they're not even that fast, and when they get into close combat, they're not that dangerous. If you want to do a role in the army that requires Primaries, 2 wound models to infiltrate, use Phobos armoured troops choices such as infiltrators and Aggressors. You'll get more bang for your buck. Riva's absolute rubbish, still are rubbish in this edition. Moving on to my third choice, we're going to have 2 units rolled into 1. The Repulsor and the Repulsor Executioner. They're very similar units and they hold a very similar sort of role in the army. They're like a Rhino and a Razorback, a little bit different in their application, but both of them are firepower heavy and very expensive. And therein is the problem. They don't have enough firepower to justify being over 300 points each. The Executioner in particular has lost a special rule to be able to fire twice, so it's become a distinctly average choice. They're still powerful tanks in their own right, but why would you take them when you've got access to the new Gladiator, which could be the deliberate ploy by Games Workshop, or it could just be a mistake? If you do want to go for a vehicle-heavy army with your Space Marines, then you'll take Gladiators, you'll take Predators, you'll take Razorbacks, and you'll have just as much fun, if not more, than investing a massive amount of points into a vehicle that is less survivable than a Land Raider, but yet costs more points. Sure, it's got more weapons, but a lot of those are bolter weapons, and if you put las cannons on it, you're going to increase the value of the vehicle, but not increase its ability to take out other vehicles when you've got a lot of melter for cheaper. and you've got other las cannons on other platforms for cheaper. The only reason to take a repulsor is if you want to get your aggressors up the table quickly, and that's a big problem in itself because the points investment becomes very steep, and why would you do that when you've got access to Blade Guard for assault troops? So you can see it's a bit of a problem, these repulsors and executioners. They've really lost out in this edition. They still have a place, they still have a lot of firepower. They're not absolute rubbish, they're not like the Riva situation, but they have lost out big time in this codex. You do have to think very carefully about your list building, whether you want to take a repulsor or an executioner in your armies now. My fourth choice is the Thunderfire Cannon. It's pretty similar to its previous incarnation, except that its strength has gone down to 4. Sure, with the blast special rule, you can get a lot of hits on a large unit. However, being just strength 4 means that I could get a lot of strength 4 hits elsewhere. Probably more strength 4 hits if I use the Devastator squad as a perfect example with missile launchers. This was a bit of a shame because it's a very iconic unit for Space Marines in previous editions. Thunderfire cannons, there's something cool about a tech marine blasting away with a field artillery, but then perhaps Thunderfire cannons had to be decreased in value because the Fire Strike servo turret is coming out and they don't want it to compete with that, even though they have quite different weapon systems. Really though, I would rather have a servo turret with the accelerator autocannon, so I'd have 6 shots at strength 7 rather than 4d3 shots at strength 4. It's kind of a no-brainer for me. Not particularly salty with this one. You can get a little bit of utility out of it. It still has stratagem support. It still ignores line of sight, so it does have a purpose. However, it's just not quite as good as it used to be. The new Codex Space Marines is quite a good codex. Most of the units in it are actually fairly effective on the tabletop and have a place. So filling out my fourth choice was fairly easy, but when I got to the fifth, I got a little bit stuck. It is very hard to choose any firstborn choices because they've all gone up by 1 wound, except for, of course, the scouts, but they are not fully fledged Space Marines and they're already on the list. Sure, the first 3 came to me very quickly. The fourth wasn't exactly a hard choice. This last choice wasn't so straightforward. There was hot competition with 3 separate units. Relic Terminators did go up by 1 wound, but they've lost access to transhuman physiology, as have all classic Firstborn Marines, but they also have lost their individual flavour that made them actually worthwhile on the tabletop. They lost the Cataphracti Terminator suits having 4+ invulnerable save, or the Tartarus suits having a 6+ movement. They still are relatively effective on the table, but they've lost a little bit of edge that made them worthwhile over normal Terminators that had heavy weapons. The other dishonourable mention, hotly contested for the number 5 slot, was Centurions. Both units of Centurions no longer count as having bolter drill, which means they can no longer use hurricane bolters at ranges over 12 to fire twice. Now it's a mediocre 6 shots per model, and the expense of the models has not really decreased. It's actually gone up, particularly for the Devastator Centurions. However, they do still have a bit of firepower and a bit of a role to play, and they haven't lost out as badly as a lot of other things on the table, particularly the last choice on this list, which is going to be Space Marine Primaries Aggressors. Space Marine Aggressors are a widely used unit, and they have lost quite a lot. So they had to make the list. People would just be absolutely up in arms. There'd be pitchforks out if I didn't add them to the list. They've lost the ability to fire twice if they remain stationary, which is a massive decrease in their power. They suffer, along with a lot of other units, of no longer getting full rerolls unless they're specifically targeted by a chapter master, who is no longer an auto-include, simply for the fact that they can only affect 1 unit a turn. They have stiff competition in close combat from Blade Guard, Vanguard Veterans and Terminators, and they're fairly slow. They can't teleport, and only some of the chapters can get them up the table easily using stratagem support. But again, that costs a command point. Otherwise you're going to be after forking out a lot of points on a repulsor just to get them up the table for a bit of close combat, when you could just use an impulsor and some Blade Guard for pretty much the same result. They've also lost the ability to ignore the penalty to hit when advancing with their assault weapons. They still have a place. They're still not too bad in a Space Marine army. They have a bit of effect with flamers in particular, but they've lost a bit of an edge, and I think they will slowly start to creep out of Space Marine lists, particularly competitive lists, as the metas move on and as people's other Codex books come out, because they just don't have the survivability, even being Gravis armor. They're only 3+ armor save, and Plasma will cut right through them. AP -1 does a lot of damage to them, simply because they go down to a 4-up save and it becomes 50-50. Ultimately, they're just not going to be as useful on the tabletop, I think, long term. And even if they are, they've still lost quite a lot to make it onto this list. Anyway, that's my top 5 biggest losers in Codex Space Marines 9th edition. I think they're quite well thought out, and I don't think many people will dispute those top 5s. You might have your own choices, so let me know what you think in the comments below. And please like and subscribe. I can't say that enough. I'm really trying to grow the channel, and I appreciate all the support you guys give to me. I'll catch you all soon with some more videos. Peace out.